global markets affected by all-out war in the Middle East, anti-AI sentiment on the rise, and crypto starting to influence the midterm elections. It's your boys at Arcanum Ventures, and we're back with another weekly recap. It's Sasha and Carmelo with Arcanum Ventures here to deliver you all of the major news from the last week within the worlds of finance, markets, technology, hardware, AI, and blockchain and Web3. We've got a lot of crazy stories from the past week, a lot of it around what's happening in the Middle East. And I guess that takes us into our first segment. Melo, how are you doing and how's everything going? And what is your sentiment around what's happening in the Middle East with Iran?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally doing all right. But, it's been a bit of a rough week. So I just wanted to say before we dive in that I hope our friends and family around the world is staying safe right now. I know it's a kind of a extra interesting time to live in right now. And there's a lot going on. And yeah, our first story is pretty much about the Middle East crisis that's happening right now and how it's affecting the economy. So, one of the biggest stories this week and how it's impacting the economy is that oil markets are completely strained as the Strait of Hormuz crisis threatens global supply. And anybody that's unfamiliar with that, it's a massive choke point. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. So all of the oil, all of the logistics that goes through that strait is being affected right now. I believe there's been a sharp escalation in the Middle East conflict, and traffic is effectively halted. The world's most critical energy choke point, setting oil prices to multi-month highs and forcing a scramble for alternative supply routes. So I think roughly 20% of global oil consumption has taken a hit. It's seen tanker traffic slow to a near standstill following Iranian warnings and attacks on commercial vessels. And Brent crude spiked to over $85 per barrel early in the week, a 13 to 15% jump since the conflict start. So, it's looking pretty gnarly for a lot of the economies out there. A lot of countries that are very dependent on this, some more than others. I think some of these bigger countries that pump a lot of their own oil, they're a little bit more insulated from this. But I believe some of the countries in Asia, like Japan and South Korea, are affected more than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that number I've heard as well. 20% of the world's oil and natural gas being shipped through the Strait of Hormuz after, before it's been closed down. I had read in a recent article that 10 tankers have been struck in separate attacks. But yeah, this is affecting the world on the markets level, outside of all of the tragedy that's happening that comes with war and military action that we've seen in the Middle East like before. South Korea's market went off a nosedive. I believe the single largest drop in the stock market's history since 2001. And I think that is also kind of reverberating through the Japanese markets as well. These countries that are so dependent on fossil fuels coming out of the Middle East. So we're going to continue to monitor the situation and see how the markets recover. But more importantly, what is unfolding in Iran and the Middle East.
Yeah, who would have thought war is terrible for business, and it's just an ugly conflict all around. And this is the main story. Usually we cover more than one story in this macro market section, but this is the story effectively. And it shows and it highlights how, we're at the mercy of oil, basically. It is that big. It is that important in driving the economy. So everything revolves around that. And chips, it seems like oil and chips are the things we talk about most often when we talk about the economy.
Not talking about snacks.
Yeah, and we have no idea what's going to happen. So we're obviously going to be keeping an eye out over the next week and seeing what happens with this, what unfolds and how it affects the economy, but also how it affects our friends and family and everything going on in the world, because it's a nasty situation.
Yeah.
And speaking of chips, moving on to technology and hardware, Huawei unveils AI computing clusters aimed at competing with NVIDIA's data center stack, pitching them as among the world's most powerful AI systems. This week, obviously, was the MWC in Barcelona. It's one of the biggest conferences in the world, and a lot of tech companies were showing off what they're going to be working on this year. So, the Chinese telecom giant Huawei is interested in competing with NVIDIA, which is a smart business move, and it also has geopolitical implications as well, because China is very dependent on a company from Taiwan and from the US, basically. So they're going to want to compete and start building their own chips to rival NVIDIA. So they announced that last September, Atlas 950 SuperPod and Taishan 950 SuperPod have been hailed by the company as the world's most powerful AI compute systems using local chip making processes. And they are part of Huawei's efforts to break the supply chokehold, restricting China's access to the most advanced chips. So very interesting. I think there's at least one story every week where a new company is getting in on the chip madness and trying to compete because, NVIDIA is on top of the mountain. They have the world's biggest market cap, biggest company of all time, I think. So not a surprise.
Yeah, classic China move. Try and catch up to the industry leader, and then claim that you are now the industry leader by having caught up to them. This again, like you said, this comes as no surprise. Outside of the fabrication landscape and TSMC's dominance, obviously, chip design and chip manufacturing that's been led by NVIDIA has been really impacted, or I'm sorry, it's impacted China due to these restrictions and the barring of, I believe, H100 and H200 chips that China has been prevented from accessing, and so they've got to catch up in some way. Obviously, they're going to try and make up this effort through Huawei or some other potentially state-sponsored nationwide companies that can manufacture these chips. This is also interesting considering what's happened. I believe a story we covered last week around Anthropic and many of the foundational LLM developers in China essentially attacking Anthropic through prompt injection to try and decode how the LLM works and take some lessons learned there. So, it's difficult to understand like what to believe that's coming out of China, even these private companies in China and the progress they're actually making. But I'm sure that these super chip clusters are going to go to some use. Many developers in China most likely going to test them out and use them. Maybe we'll get some real benchmarks on, what this move is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's in their best interest to pump this up, whether it's legit or not, to say we have the capability and we're going to, be making our own chips and we're going to be competitive there. But yeah, you're right. Like last week we spoke about Anthropic and the drama around the U.S. government versus Anthropic as well, and them threatening to remove their legal status and remove them from the supply chain, much like Huawei, because they would be the first American company put on that list. Huawei is obviously a Chinese company, so they have reason to put that on. But interesting nonetheless, Huawei is not welcome in the US, and they are obviously one of the most important companies in China. So it makes all the sense in the world to start creating these chips and these super clusters and compete with NVIDIA. I think it might be legit. I don't really trust any governments on what they're saying on these things, but there's no reason to believe why Huawei in China, with all their capital and resources, is not going to be competitive in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. The chip landscape grows. Speaking of chips I guess everything's chip based. We've got some major news coming out from the Apple camp. And I think this is something that many people have been waiting for, especially since Apple's super duper in real life event that they hosted across 3 major cities across the world. So they've announced a bunch of new computer models that feature their M5 chip, the new MacBook Air with M5 chip. I wish this came out like 6 months ago before I bought my M4 MacBook Air. But very exciting nonetheless. And then more importantly, they released their new budget MacBook they're referring to as Neo, which I believe was it was kind of shopped around as maybe like a beta name that they were kind of keeping under wraps. But this is a MacBook that is priced right now at, I believe, $699 US, and really looking to tackle this sort of like education crowd, low budget laptops for very light usage, like let's say, browser activity, emails, maybe some like very light workbook and spreadsheet activity. Obviously, not really competing with the MacBook Air or the MacBook Pro in general, because it uses the A18 Pro class chips from the iPhone 16 before. So like the technical capabilities of this are quite low, but the MacBook Neo itself does look really cool. It comes in like a number of new colors, and it grants that sort of like Apple ecosystem accessibility to a crowd that otherwise would not consider entering, considering that the MacBook Air is priced around $1,000. I believe higher now. So very exciting.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like, I think some people have said this is a bad move because it kind of removes a bit of that premium. I don't know, that vibe that Apple gives off. Like their higher end computers, but you also got to think, like, I see our parents' generation or even our grandparents' generation sometimes using and buying MacBooks. Maybe they have the money, but they don't understand that this is way more powerful than what they need. So, having a lower price device for everyday use, or maybe not even everyday use, but streaming on Netflix or checking emails or making weird posts on Facebook, like parents like to do. So I think like this makes a lot of sense. And also, I think either a week or 2 weeks ago, we saw something similar from Apple. I think it was about wearables or phones also coming down in price, or starting to offer more of these lower cost, trying to target and tackle that market as well, because it seems like it's a huge gap for the company. So it might be a really good business move for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And finally, we got more Chinese companies here. Xiaomi trials humanoid robots in its EV factory, saying they are like unpaid interns. And last week we that's pretty disappointing. But last week we talked about a few companies like in China and with Tesla pivoting more into building robots. But it looks like Xiaomi is doing something more. They're working on self-developed humanoid robots in its electric vehicle factories. The CEO told the CNBC that two humanoid robots can compete 90% of the work in 3 hours. At an interview at the Mobile World Congress. So a lot happening over in Barcelona right now. Good conference to be at, apparently. And yeah, it's really interesting. We're seeing China, like, this is a reoccurring theme every week. China's leaning more into robotics. I think they want to be the king of the hill on that front. Looks like US is like the king of the hill on AI right now, but robotics is firmly in the grasp of China. So there's a plethora of Chinese firms that have gone public recently developing this sort of technology, and experts expect China to ramp up production of robots this year. I think one crazy statistic that I saw this week, analysts at RBC Capital Markets forecast a global total addressable market for humanoids of $9 trillion by 2050, with China accounting for more than 60% of that. So obviously some wild projections for the next 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to think about these projections. I know a lot of people are very, very excited about humanoid robots getting some greater development and greater capability, being deployed for a number of different applications, within factories or manufacturing, or let's say healthcare industry, or food and beverage, or hospitality, or whatever. Right? I think people look at this future as like something that we're logically moving forward towards, but in my mind, I think the market is completely being overestimated.
Yeah.
I do believe that humanoid robots, for a lot of applications they're being touted around for, are going to be incredibly inefficient compared to purpose-driven robots, or just like, let's say, automated manufacturing robotics. But still something very cool. I think we're kind of right now in like a robotics race to deliver something better and better, and there's no end in sight. So it's going to be a period of extreme innovation on the hardware front. Now, on the software front, because you mentioned that the U.S. is, at least companies that are headquartered in the U.S. or have been founded in the U.S. originally and then maybe shipped overseas somewhere, are leading AI development and AI-based software capability. And so I wonder if in some hopeful future, this is a way to bring foreign relationships between the U.S. and China closer together so that they can jointly create the Terminator. But we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, I think that's like it's kind of a picks and shovels thing, but I'm seeing more and more companies focusing on the tech stack, the like exactly right, like the crossover between the embodied AI and the actual physical devices. So building clouds and different sort of software and making it easier, democratizing it so more people can build robot and robotic adjacent technology. So it's kind of making it easier. You don't have to be one of these super companies to build robotics right now, so it's getting more popular, and I like geeking out to this stuff. It's really interesting to me, and it's important to note that like AI has been around forever, like for decades. Robotics have been around for decades, like already in fact car factories. They've already been having military and police application. And this past week, I saw a really interesting story in Fukushima. They just developed a new robot to clean up radiation because obviously it's too dangerous for humans to go in and clean that up. So it's interesting because a lot of people are anti AI and they're going to take our jobs, whatnot. But these jobs, these dangerous jobs that robots can actually do to save humans from harm, it's very important. Like you don't want people going into Chernobyl or to Fukushima cleaning up radiation. That's no good. So it's exactly the application that we expect robots to fulfill in the next few decades. But maybe not these cleaning up your house if you're too lazy to do your dishes. That's a little bit ridiculous.
I suppose you could always throw unpaid interns at those jobs.
Yeah, I love how they call them unpaid. Imagine being an unpaid intern right now and hearing that. And you're like, oh man, this is what they
Oh
think of me.
man, yeah. Heart goes out to those unpaid interns. Okay, and moving on to AI news, we've got some wild news coming out of OpenAI, who secured the largest private fundraising round ever in history. They locked down $110 billion in funding at an $840 billion valuation. This is a private company, keep in mind, backed by Amazon, NVIDIA, SoftBank, and a number of other ones. The deal is said to be tightly linked to long term infrastructure commitments, with OpenAI expanding its Amazon Web Services agreements by $100 billion over 8 years and committing to 2 gigawatts of Amazon's titanium chips. I'm unfamiliar with those titanium chips, but obviously, an investment of that size comes with a lot of commitments, and Amazon and the other players in the game are likely hoping for a high return on something like this. I believe this might mark OpenAI's, is it their Series H round or Series I round? I don't know which one they're up to, but it is kind of crazy considering that we've been kind of throwing around the idea of private companies reaching a $1 trillion market cap before ever going public. It looks like we're fastly approaching that. I don't know if we want to call it a milestone because it might be something very concerning regarding the perception of an AI bubble. But it looks like we're getting there because this fundraising round comes as news after only several months back, OpenAI filling out their Series G or Series H round.
Yeah, I think they've like evolved beyond the need for rounds. They just always accepting money from different entities. And I think a few weeks back, or maybe a month back, we showed this graphic, this incestuous circle of companies that seems to be fueling each other. Like Amazon, Nvidia, they're all working together. They're all giving each other resources, chips, land, data centers, capital, brain power. So it's like it's almost as if a super company is emerging without actually being classified as that, but they're all working together for a common goal, at least to make as much money as possible to drive innovation and make the biggest company of all time. But yeah, it's a little bit worrying, like how much money is being pumped into capex. Like we've been covering this story for a while, and the capex spending is increasing month after month. Uh, Everybody seems to be aware of the eventuality or the fact that there is a bubble, but nobody seems to care. Nobody's doing anything about it, which is interesting because I've never seen a bubble like that where you just keep charging in that direction and hoping like, yeah, we're going to take the pain. We're pricing it in. We know there's going to be a huge burst, but we're still going to power through that as well. So it's pretty incredible that companies are raising this much money, and it's hard to keep up. Like between Anthropic and OpenAI and Musk's companies, it seems like every week they're raising another $1 billion. Like they're literally printing money. I don't know where they're finding all this cash. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, they're setting up insider poly market bets for sure. That's how they're just trickling all this money in. But it's interesting because I haven't heard many of these foundational model developers speak about the pursuit of AGI in a while. So I wonder if the narrative is shift and they're talking more about fundamentals, expanding the business use cases around these LLMs, and more transparently communicating that maybe these LLMs aren't the architecture that's going to lead us towards the eventual AGI. But that means that they're on a journey of improving efficiency of these models, cutting costs, and consuming less resources. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, this is a step towards that direction, because everyone's very, very aware of the resource requirements to make these LLMs run. With that said, please stop asking ChatGPT to generate cute cat photos, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect that they are aware of the fact that LLMs are not going to play a large role in the future for AGI, but this CapEx expenditure is just the anticipation of the need for these resources in the future. If we're going to get to AGI, we have to start putting in the framework and the infrastructure now, which is what I think they're doing, and why they're making so much money. Like LLMs and ChatGPT itself are going to play less and less of a role on the balance sheet and the revenue for OpenAI in the future. I believe it's just going to be one of their products out of many. But for now, yeah, it's crazy how much money they're getting. They're basically just an AI lab that does anything AI tangent. And the government is obviously fueling that because, the US government owns part of NVIDIA. NVIDIA is investing in this. So it's this weird cluster of companies that work together. They invest in each other. It's hard to see where one begins and where one ends, which is interesting. I've never seen anything like it. And kind of ties into our next story. ChatGPT uninstalls surged by 295% after the DoD deal last week. And we covered this last week too. Anthropic saying no ultimately to the US government and the Department of War's ultimatum, saying we do not want to be used for autonomous weaponry. We don't want to be used for mass surveillance on the public, and putting their foot down, which was pretty big. And interesting thing, a lot of builders from companies like OpenAI and Google in solidarity signed a industry-wide letter saying we stand with Anthropic, even working at companies that signed the agreement. So U.S. app uninstalls of ChatGPT's mobile app jumped by almost 300% day over day on Saturday, February 28th, as consumers responded to the news of OpenAI's deal with the Department of Defense, which has been rebranded as the Department of War, ominously. And meanwhile, U.S. downloads for OpenAI's competitor, Anthropic Claude, jumped up by 37% day over day on Friday and 51% on Saturday, including myself, actually. I ditched ChatGPT finally, and I don't know if I'm going to move to Claude yet, but I don't feel comfortable using ChatGPT anymore. So yeah, that's some big news, breaking news right now. And it's noted that Claude is now the #1 free iPhone app in 6 countries outside the U.S., including Belgium, Canada, Germany, Luxembourg, Norway, and Switzerland, among others. And it's kind of a shock. Like I always say, people vote with their money. It's more impactful and important than the vote you get to vote for president or your local Congress representative. It's ultimately where you spend your money supports these companies and their growth or how much they shrink. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of people are uncomfortable with what's going on in this collusion between the government and these massive, very powerful companies that you can argue are more powerful than governments themselves. So interesting to see how that unfolds. And if people will stick with this trend next week, we'll probably mention if this trend is continuing or if it kind of reversed and people forgot about it already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, I considered canceling my ChatGPT subscription because of this news. It's kind of been a roller coaster when it comes to AI ethics and AI safety. Considering in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of controversy around Anthropic releasing its, let's say, AI ethics or values manifesto or document that outlined how they're aligning the functionality of Claude and its output towards human values, but then kind of backtracking on that. And then, that came as news before Anthropic releasing news about working with the US government in this fashion and then pulling out. So it's difficult to understand where you want to align your ethics with what product you want to use. it's interesting because for a lot of people like me, I assume that have been using ChatGPT, after you use these models for a long time, they do benefit from imposing switching costs onto their users because of the memory capabilities and the chat history, and ChatGPT really understanding who I am, what I'm working on, all the different things that are in my workflows, and being able to bring that into new instances of chats and prompts that I have with it, that I can benefit from kind of speeding up that process. So there is a switching cost barrier there in having to switch something over and then work with Anthropic or Claude or like Gemini from the beginning again. But it does go to show how powerful the pushback on this news has been. And it doesn't really surprise me. I think Sam Altman is quite an opportunist. He's been labeled as one of the world's greatest opportunists within the Valley by many journalists and technologists. So, him moving forward with this DoD or DO War partnership, it's something that I think many people saw coming.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't feel comfortable with it. And you're right. It's really difficult to make people switch, even if, ethically they're bothered by it. You know how hard it is to get people to move off of a social media platform or away from a service that they don't like, or some company that's doing something dishonest. But fortunately, Claude very wisely, speaking of opportunist, they released this new memory app. I don't know what to call it, but a way to basically make that switch less painful. So I think that's brilliant. That's really thinking in an agile way. They immediately released this, knowing, maybe even anticipating, as soon as they said no, that there would be this, people would start to choose sides in a line. Like, I'm a Claude person, I'm a OpenAI ChatGPT person. So they are making it easier than ever to switch over. You can even export your data from ChatGPT, send it to your email. I've done this, and then you can actually upload it into whatever model you want to use next, and it has all that long tail memory, at least like a picture of who you are and how you use these tools, which is scary, but it's also helpful. But yeah, just some information there for people that do want to make the switch. Not telling you what to use, but I do believe in the future we'll be more agnostic about these tools. Like, I believe with Venice AI, which I checked out the other day, it gives you like 40 different models you can switch between seamlessly, and you can use some of them privately too. So it's really interesting, the sort of aggregators that are starting to pop out of the woodwork.
Oh yeah. And speaking of anti-AI sentiment, there was, let's say, one of the largest anti-AI protests hosted in London ever last week on February 28th. I believe a couple hundred anti-AI protesters marched through London's King's Cross Tech Hub, which is home of the UK headquarters of OpenAI, Meta, Google DeepMind, and some other companies, chanting slogans and waving signs. Apparently, the march was organized by two separate activist groups named Pause AI, fittingly enough, and Pull the Plug. Kind of like, I like these names, actually. And so it was billed as the largest protest of its kind yet, and it was focused on raising concerns that covered everything from online AI slop to abusive images being generated that we've seen with Grok AI, and also AI applications in killer robots during wartime, and general human extinction or obsolescence from robotics or AI. So on a related note, a university study tested frontier models with simulated nuclear launch authorities and find that they use the codes, or these AI models choose or elect to use the nuclear launch codes in most of the runs, which I guess kind of further fueled the concerns for this anti-AI sentiment rising, saying that AI being used in wartime or for defense purposes is unreliable and not safe.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand. Like, I always have this internal conflict. Like, you and I are tech VCs, we invest in this technology, but we're like also seeing firsthand the dangers and the warning signs. Like, we absolutely have to be careful and cautious. And I think this is just further lends itself. It's proof that AGI is not even close to happening with LLMs. Like, LLMs are not really capable of considering the implications or the existential crisis of using nuclear weapons. Like, it's not human enough to understand how bad that is. It's just like a statistic or a number to them. So I think the good news is that we are not even remotely close to having AI governance, true governance. Some people say we should replace our dirty politicians and our corrupt politicians with AI, but I think that might be somehow worse than what we already have. We're not close to that being a good thing. But yeah, I think it's funny that the biggest anti-AI protest of all time is just a few hundred people in London. I think in the future, maybe next year, we're going to see tens of thousands of people marching because it's becoming a more of an everyday normie topic. Like I don't know about you, but I've had more conversations with friends and family lately about AI than I ever did before in my entire life before this year. So it seems like not everybody's an expert or anywhere close to an expert, but they have an opinion. They're using these tools more. And the worry is growing too, because like the more you interface with these tools, the more you realize there's a potential for bad actors to come in, hackers, faulty code, you name it. So there's definitely growing anti-AI sentiment. Funny enough, also, like I agree with these people. Like we should be more cautious, but at the same time, on the other side, you see a lot of like anti-progress people that say everything that's technological is bad or evil, and it's kind of like the Luddite movement in the U.S. like a century or two ago, like people saying any technology is bad for humanity, which is not the case. There's been some amazing pieces of machinery or simple tools that have made our lives a hell of a lot easier. So I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Like I don't want to accelerate as fast as these tech bros, but I don't want to pause everything and say AI is definitely bad or evil and it's never going to help us. Like both can be true.
Yeah, but at least stop the slop.
Stop the slop. No killer robots. Don't give nuclear codes to robots or AI yet. We're not there yet. All right. We've had a few slow blockchain weeks in the last few weeks, but this week was actually pretty exciting. And Bitcoin is finally back above 70K, I believe, right now as time of filming. So that's good news. And first on our list, I don't know about if you've been following the primaries and the midterm election. It's a little bit early. Those were happening in November, but the crypto campaign PAC Fair Shake marks its first wins in 2026 U.S. congressional primaries. In the opening primaries of the midterm congressional context, Fair Shake is celebrating victories of several pro-crypto candidates backed by the super PAC. And important to note, this is on both sides of the aisle too. It's not a Republic versus Democrat thing anymore. It's just within parties, there's anti and pro-crypto people. So on Tuesday, the initial results show several wins for pro-crypto candidates backed by this PAC. One of the super PAC's major efforts, however, was in getting crypto critic Representative Al Green out of office in Texas. And it looks like it appears that he's not going to be representing the Democrats in the actual general election. And on the Republican side, a former Department of Justice lawyer backed by Trump, Jessica Steinman, secured a dominant victory with almost 70% of the vote in the Republican primary for Texas's 8th district. On the Dem side, the Fair Shake opposed Green with $1.5 million in ads. So that's not a small sum of money from this PAC. That's a lot of money for a primary in a congressional race. So they opposed him with $1.5 million in ads because they recognize that he's very anti-crypto. And they're supporting pro-blockchain Kristen Menefee in a newly redrawn congressional district. Both incumbents were forced to pursue. So neither candidate took more than half the vote. So they will head to a runoff. But we're starting to see this more and more, crypto being like a votable issue. And these PACs, there's a lot of money pumped in from pro-crypto entities, exchanges, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to unpackage this one because so much has happened in the crypto landscape over the past year. Let's say year plus, right? Because we had Trump coin come to market in the beginning of 2025. And since then, it's really been a roller coaster. It's hard to tell where a lot of this interest is coming from, where the PAC capital is really coming from and why they're backing certain individuals. On one hand, you have many organizations and individuals that benefit from more loose cryptocurrency regulation. Maybe there is some alternative agenda there. On the other hand, we have a lot of discussions on the forefront of news around the Clarity Act and clarity, pun intended, in regulation around stablecoin yield that's offered to everyone, including retail investors and just everyday people like your aunt and uncle. Mm-hmm. And so it's important to understand like where the agenda is coming from. but it is good to see that cryptocurrency regulation is on the forefront of this discussion for the midterm elections. And I think hopefully we'll see that trickle down into the current state of affairs when it comes to the Clarity Act, because I don't think we have that clarity yet. There's still a lot of debate on how these banks want to proceed, how these exchanges want to proceed, and they're butting heads because there's a lot of money at stake.
Yeah, I think Trump is threatening weekly, saying like, you need to pass this yesterday. Like this needs to be done now. We need to lead the world in crypto. So I guess a lot of money from these big entities and rich people like Coinbase and Kraken are pumping in, because you and I or retail people are not putting money to these packs. You know, this is not influenced by the little people.
Yeah. More news around the cross section of crypto and government. This seems to be, most of what's happening this week. South Korea was hacked. Well, I mean, not really. The South Korean tax service, they apparently accidentally leaked their seed phrases that resulted in nearly $5 million of cryptocurrency. Apparently, they had publicly shared a photo that exposed hardware wallet seed phrases, which is incredibly embarrassing coming from a government office within a country that is widely known as a major tech hub. The incident is the country's second major loss of seized crypto following a 2021 case that involved 22 Bitcoin being hacked or, let's say, lost that was held by police. Authorities have asked police in South Korea to help recover the stolen funds, and they also pledged to execute an external security review by a third party. So the crypto was immediately taken from the National Tax Service after that leak, and after the photo of the seed phrase was shared. And then the service apologized for the incident that was reported on Asia Business Daily on Sunday. So some incredible news. This isn't the first time that a government agency has been targeted for crypto holdings. Definitely not going to be the last time, but still really embarrassing, because that is an awful way to go. That's not even social engineering. That's just, hey, check out my seed phrase, homies. And then boom, gone.
Yeah, and I don't know who they're apologizing to. Like they're apologizing to themselves for losing the money that they took from some criminal. But it's hilarious. And whether you like crypto or not, whether you're pro crypto or anti crypto government, it does make sense to have people that at least know the technology in the government. You know, like we're going to see more and more. I think a lot of private crypto company people are going to be moving into public service, because there's a need to recruit these people. Like this is a new technology that's not going away anytime soon, and we need more people that know how to secure these funds and they know how to use them and send them without making these massive rookie mistakes. And saying this is a hack is a little bit like saying, you know, like you dropped your wallet or you left your wallet at a restaurant and then screaming, somebody stole me, somebody mugged me, they stole my wallet. You know, it's not that you posted a picture on the internet and somebody just said, I wonder if I could just take this money.
Yeah.
And lastly, we got another government and crypto story. Kraken became the first digital asset bank to receive a Federal Reserve master account. And I think it's funny that they've kind of rebranded themselves. All of these exchanges, they're rebranding themselves as digital asset banks, not crypto exchanges. So I think this might tie back into the Clarity Act and, you know, this existential threat that the banks are feeling from crypto industry companies like Kraken and Coinbase. You know, they're starting to call themselves banks. They're getting these fancy highfalutin ideas that they're going to take us down and they're going to replace us. So this is a massive, maybe boring story for some, but it's pretty massive. They said on their actual official blog, we are excited to announce that Kraken Financial, our Wyoming chartered bank, has been granted a Federal Reserve master account. The approval makes Kraken Financial the first digital asset bank in U.S. history to gain direct access to the Federal Reserve's payment infrastructure. And what does that mean? It means it's going to be even easier to settle transactions directly via Fedwire, the real-time gross settlement network used by traditional banks. The approval is for limited purpose or skinny accounts with an initial 1-year term. And unlike full-service banks, Kraken will not earn interest on reserves or have access to the Fed's emergency discount window lending. Initial services will focus on facilitating faster and more efficient fiat transfers for institutional clients. So just a little bit more of like the marrying or the blending together of traditional finance rails and blockchain, exactly what you and I have been predicting for years. Like the governments, major companies, they're using this infrastructure and this tech in the least exciting way possible, but massively impactful.
Yeah, the news is huge, honestly, and this comes before Coinbase, which Coinbase is a publicly traded company for a while now.
Yep.
I think I still hold a Coinbase stock position in my portfolio. But one of the big things here is like they will not earn interest on their reserves, and I think this ties into a lot of the discussion around the Clarity Act, what these exchanges really want to see, and this might mean in reference to something else around their fiat reserves. But this is what a lot of traditional banks are focused on, trying to bar this yield that's going to stablecoin issuers. I'm sorry, stablecoin holders, right?
Yeah.
They want to be able to compete with these digital asset service full service banks. They want to retain their customers' capital so that they can later invest and generate their own yield on it. And this is exactly the lunch that Kraken and Coinbase and others are trying to eat, right? They're offering a much higher interest rate or a much higher yield opportunity for holding and potentially staking stablecoins, locking this value within this full service bank and allowing Kraken to or Coinbase to deploy that capital and other yield generating opportunities while giving a greater share to their users. This does set a really cool precedent. I will be very interested to follow this story and see what happens over the coming year with this master account that's being granted to Kraken, because it really signals that the Federal Reserve is now willing to work with traditional digital asset service providers. And it's just opened the door. So I think we're going to see a kind of flood of this happening, and stable coins and digital assets taking more of the center stage within the retail financial markets.
Yeah, and the greatest story here is who eats who first? Banks eat digital asset crypto exchanges, or do exchanges eat banks? Or stable coins too. Like stablecoin companies, Circle and Tether might grow into be much bigger than any of the big banks that we know of today.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we all lose. Just joking.
All right, and I think we could finally move on to the last segment. For those unfamiliar, we're going to go over the biggest fundraisers that we saw this week. We might miss a few. We're only going to cover 6 or 7, I believe. But yeah, let's jump in with the first one. IR Labs, a San Jose, California-based startup, making AI chips more efficient. We always talk about the chip crunch and shortage, so it makes sense to make chips more efficient. I don't know how they're doing that. They raised $500 million in a Series E funding. NVIDIA, usual suspect, AMD, MediaTek, and AI Chip and others led this round.
Yeah, it's wild. I got to dive into that one and see what's happening there.
Yep.
Up next, we've got Growth Therapy. They raised $150 million in a Series D round for its in-person and online therapy plus psychiatric care platform, which is a very, very interesting use case for let's say the healthcare industry, and also what we've been seeing on the AI front. This round was led by TCV and Goldman Sachs Alternatives, Growth Equity, and participation by BCI, Menlo Ventures, Sequoia, Signal Fire, Transformation Capital, and others.
Yeah, I don't see any mention of AI there, but I would be shocked if there's no instance of AI in that company or doing something. Every platform has 100%. That now. And next, we got a Boston, Massachusetts company, Multitude Insights. They raised $10 million in a Series A for AI-powered intelligence tools used by law enforcement agencies, led by primary venture partners, joined by VSC, Commonweal, NEC, Counterview, and others.
It's wild how all of this business will trickle back down to ChatGPT. All right, next up we have EGI Battery Incorporated, a company out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. They raised $10 million seed round for advanced battery technology and manufacturing, led by TSV Capital and joined by multiple other U.S. family offices.
All right, yeah, more battery tech I think we've been seeing lately too. And next up we got Jetstream from Santa Clara, California, raised $34 million in a seed round for AI governance. That's all I got. I don't know anything more about it besides AI governance. I don't know if there's a need for that yet or what that means, but I definitely want to check into that after the stream too, because I think that's an interesting area and we don't talk enough about it. That was led by Redpoint Ventures, Falcon Fund, George Kurtz, SF Rappaport, Frederick Karist, and others.
It reminds me of that awful crypto company that launched a token, raised like $3 million, and it was just governance. Like that was their whole pitch.
Yeah.
And it went nowhere.
Yeah, we don't mention
but Best of luck, Jetstream. We'll see how that goes. Up next, we have Flink. Great name. Out of Berlin, they raised $100 million for its rapid grocery delivery business, co-led by Process Ventures and Be Tomorrow Ventures. I'm interested to see like what that rapid grocery delivery business looks like. I mean, they're competing with some well-established players in the space.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I think we might have to add a segment or a facet of this segment just to say yes or no. Does this have AI? Maybe take some bets on this. Like, is this an AI company or not?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm pretty sure all of them will be like guilty, but we never know. It looks like they're starting to hide the AI tag from a lot of their let's say public announcements. But that's all we got for this week, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching and joining us for this past week's weekly recap. The biggest news stories within the worlds of AI, technology, hardware, markets, and Web3. Your friends at Arcanum Ventures wishing all of you and our friends and family in Iran and the Middle East a very, very safe week. Please be safe and take care of yourselves. We're hoping for all of the best, especially with this awful tension and activity in the Middle East. But until then, stay safe out there. And yeah, stay diligent. Much love, y'all.
Ciao, everybody. Stay safe.
Ciao.